Hi, this is my review of Era Survival Core Rulebook. This is a post-apocalypse role-playing game that introduces some unique things into some staples or old favorites of a post-apocalypse setting. This is about an outbreak, a plague of mutations that starts to twist and create deformities amongst the population of the planet. You have humans and animals, pretty much anything that is hot-blooded, that is shaped and malformed and driven to devour, consume, and infect everything in its path. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The quality is excellent. You have great looking art, as expected from a Shades of Vengeance product. The organization is great as well. Everything is well written. My only criticisms? There are no bookmarks. However, bookmarks are being added to the different books of Shades of Vengeance, so we will probably see them in the near future in this book of Era Survival. Another criticism is that you have a great index at the end. Very well organized, it takes you right to any sort of rule or concept in the game that you want further details on. However, this index is not hyperlinked, so you have to manually type the page that you want to go to. So I think it would be enhanced with hyperlinks. But despite that, everything else is great. So the quality is good. I really like the overall graphic design as well. It goes very well in theme with the mutations of Era Survival and the survival aspect, of course. Now let's talk about the contents. Part 1 of the book gives you everything that you need to know about the setting. I think this is great because as you read the book, you're going to come up with some ideas, some character concepts, also some ideas for adventures and campaigns. So it's great that they're giving you this effective introduction to the world of Era Survival, and later on giving you more and more details about the different factions and organizations and the situation of the world at large. There are many mysteries surrounding this airborne agent that is causing the mutations. It's not exactly known what type of disaster, intentional or non-intentional, has been causing every hot-blooded organism in the planet to mutate into a ravenous aberration that's constantly looking to devour and to infect others. So this is a bit of a mystery that you can play around with in your adventures, in your meta plot, that you can develop however you like. You do get some hints, some possible explanations, and probably in the other expansions there will be more details about this. I haven't looked, but I'm going to review all of the Era Survival material. But I think it's better than they kept things a bit more loose or ambiguous, so you can play around with the world of Era Survival and adapt it to the needs of your group. Because everything is so hostile, because there are many things that are trying to kill and eat and infect human beings, society became shattered or fragmented. There are many areas on the planet that have high level of contamination, so it's not easy to move around. You constantly have to check if there is a low or mid or high level of contamination, and there are some preventive measures to keep yourself safe from this. For example, breather masks are quite available in the different settlements. However, they will not keep you safe all the time. This agent that causes mutation, this mutagen, is quite invasive and aggressive. So even if you manage to keep your lungs safe from it, it will eventually find its way through the mask. You constantly have to replace the masks. And the skin is also vulnerable to it, and of course being cut or bitten by some of the infected organisms as well. So it's a very hostile environment. There are very few safe places on the planet. There are constant threats from these mutants, but also from different factions. Some of them are quite psychotic. So humanity has to make its way through the remnants of what was once a world of civilizations. There are also ways to detect the presence of this mutagen. You spray this substance known as flash. You spray this in the air, and there will be an exothermic reaction. You will effectively see a flash and some noise when you shoot this into the air. So the more flashy the reaction when this chemical is sprayed in the air, and the popping noise that it produces, it will tell you how contaminated an area is. So you are constantly going to be on watch to see if the area that you're approaching is in the low, med, or high zone side of things when it comes to decontamination. So these mutagenic parasites are constantly looking to infect all sorts of life forms. People have to work together, but of course there are other people that want to take advantage of the situation. They don't care about the world being destroyed. They basically want to see the world burn, sometimes quite literally. So as you are trying to survive in Gaia, you will have to think of your alliances, of the situation between the different factions and the different settlements, because sometimes humans can be the biggest threat of all. Now let's take a look at some of the factions in Era survival. First, we have one faction that isn't exactly a faction, it's more like a category outside of the factions, which are the infected. So the infected is basically any hot-blooded organism that has turned monstrous. So this isn't exactly your standard zombie apocalypse type of scenario. You have all sorts of monsters with misshapen parts of their bodies. Sometimes they make them quite efficient in combat. You will find monstrous creatures with this sort of like chitinous plate or some sort of natural or unnatural body armor protecting them. You will see some others with different appendages, completely deformed, spikes and oversized fangs and claws. All sorts of nasty weapons that the infection will give them. All sorts of mutant weapons that the parasites have given them. You will get into more details when we get to a section of the enemies in this book, but all of those creatures are hostile, surpass a human when it comes to battle capacity. You will need all of the weapons and cunning to overcome these creatures. And the worst thing of all is that these parasites, when the creature dies, they manage to gather all of the remaining, I guess you could say, life force or life potential of the creature and make it rise like a zombie. So these organisms are very difficult to kill. So this is the infected faction in the loosest sense possible. Then we have the citizens of Aqua. The citizens of Aqua feel a bit like they are their own thing in the world. They have separated themselves from the land and they rely on eating fish mostly because warm-blooded organisms are being infected in the planet. The safest thing to eat are reptiles and fish, and the citizens of Aqua rely on seafood, and sometimes they do commerce with people in the land, probably to get some other foodstuffs and gear and supplies and such, but they consider themselves like a breed apart almost. They know that the people on land will probably have the least chance of survival, so they do not expect to form long-term alliances or relationships with people outside of Aqua. Each of these factions have a lot of details concerning them. I'm just going to give you like a small description, but everything related to their founding, their background, leadership, living conditions, recruitment, and relationships, it's all here. And then we have the Cult of Progression. This is a really deranged group. They worship the infected. They think infection is good. So they will do everything in their power to keep people and every organism in the planet to become infected. They see it like the next step in evolution. And then we have the Defenders, probably one of the most heroic factions, if not the most heroic. This is basically people that have gathered together as a group of noble warriors, and they are protecting the different settlements. No matter where you are, they will be there if you request their help. Well, at least if they can. They also get targeted by different factions that do not like the way they are protecting people. So if you want to play as a part of or a member of a heroic faction, the defenders are for you. They are highly trained and they are welcomed in many settlements because of their good actions. Then we have the Nihilists. The Nihilists are a small group, but they are quite feared throughout the planet. I forgot to mention that the planet in this current time is known as Gaia. So the Nihilists infiltrate different societies and settlements, and they just want to destroy everything. They think that humanity has no salvation, so they are making everything unlivable. And they resort to different tactics and manipulations to cause death, mass destruction, as much as they can. They think they are saving humanity by leading it towards a path of destruction. So you could have known someone for several years, and it was all part of the plan to strike when you least expected and cause some sort of catastrophe or great death. And then you have the Organization of Friends. This is the group that runs City, probably the most functional or perhaps even dysfunctional city in Gaia at the moment. And they have more military might when compared to the other settlements. This city, you can basically live there and have a certain degree of commerce. In these current times, you use brass as currency, and you can enjoy luxuries, but everything comes at a price. There is a certain governing group at the top, and as long as you abide by the rules or pay tribute to them, in a matter of speaking, that you won't get in trouble and you can find some sort of living in City. But City is a place of great corruption as well. Then you have the Potestates. Potestates is a secret society. They kidnap people and they experiment on them. They think that it is possible to have the advantages of infection without having the parasites or the mutagen taking over your mind. So Potestates is the boogeyman amongst the factions, and they are probably involved in all of the abductions and mysterious disappearances. Then we have the Raiders. These are the vandals, these are the bandits. They are constantly moving throughout the entire planet, through Gaia, trying to get the best or take advantage of the situation. They are robbers, they take whatever they like from other people. At times they may work with other factions if it's in their interest, but for the most part, they are taking whatever they want from other people and claiming ownership on whatever they covet. Then we have the Runners Guild. They are the couriers in this post-apocalypse world. They move through Gaia, delivering and receiving packages. It's like a post-apocalypse version of the Pony Express, I guess. But because of that, they are welcomed in different cities. They are the best source of delivery and perhaps even communication amongst the different cities and communities. Then we have the Sisterhood of Pyrrhus. This is a matriarchy that is quite violent in its behavior. They want to take control of all of the facilities left by different laboratories and governments and put everything under their control. If you do not accept to be placed under their command, they will destroy you. And then we have the Swarm. The Swarm is probably one of the major threats when it comes to the factions. They are a group that spawned from a philosophical perspective. They basically want to burn it all. They think that to stop the infection, they have to destroy it all. So they make their way burning, literally burning everything in their path. Even if it's alive, plants, the land itself, they use flamethrowers and they want to handle a scorched earth policy. And those that do not like their policy, they will be eliminated as well. Then we have the University of Planet. This is a group of researchers that want to find a cure for this mutation. They want to find a way to stop the parasites, and they live in this special base known as Base 9. Some consider them foolish because they think that there is no remedy or cure for the mutation, but they are still constantly working, and they are a very closed group and with a somewhat strictly logical mentality in the way that they handle everything as a resource. And then we have the Vault Hunters. This is also a faction that is not exactly a faction, it's like a loose term. It's basically anyone that is looking for those hidden vaults and facilities and installations that have been abandoned over time. There are some things that could be of value, they could perhaps serve as bases. There could be some ancient lore related to the contamination and the mutations. So the Vault Hunters are constantly looking for these places to have them for themselves or to sell them. And then we have the White Cross. This is another heroic faction. They are the suppliers of the only thing that keeps you safe from mutation, which is known as injection. This is basically a substance that you can take within a certain time after contamination. Maybe you were bitten or maybe you started to breathe in a high contamination area. It is possible to use this substance to save yourself from becoming a mutant. So White Cross is constantly distributing this cure, at least for the moment. And because of that, they are also quite welcome in different settlements. But they are not the only ones that manufacture injection. There are others that also manufacture this cure, like for example the University of Planet. But the White Cross makes an extra effort to distribute this. All of these different factions get along with certain other groups, or sometimes they clash between each other. So you have a very interesting network of connections and antagonisms that you can use in your adventures and campaigns. They will be the center of everything that is going on in the world of Gaia. And then we have information on different locations. You have general information, the history of the locations, details on population, law, and crimes. Let me give you a few details of the different settlements and places of operation. We have Base 9. This is the headquarters of the University of Planet. It's located at the bottom of a large cliff, and the only clue to its location is a large number 9 still visible on the impenetrable metal door. The surrounding automated gun emplacements have long since expended their ammunition and power supplies and now lie silent, overlooking the small hills nearby. And then we have City. This is a large archipelago in the westernmost part of the inhabited Gaia. Some people refer to it as the last vestige of civilization. The islands are connected by a series of bridges left from before the cataclysm, and the skyscrapers that remain are generally undamaged. A city did not suffer a direct strike during the bombings. This is a place of great resources but also of shady dealings. And then we have Crossroads. This is the largest commercial market in Gaia. It even surpasses City in the variety of merchandise available. It is well known to be one of a very small number of locations that sells more than its own production surplus. It's also known as a place that won't ask too many questions about where you got your merchandise. And then we have Fallout. This region is one of the least hospitable on Gaia. It is both a high zone and a radioactive hot zone. The entire area is swarming with some of the most severely mutated infected ever encountered. These creatures are so dangerous that if any large group emerges from Fallout, the nearby humans band together to eliminate them. Some factions that usually clash with each other may even make alliances to stop the creatures coming out from Fallout. And then we have Highway 101. This is about halfway between the old brass mine and Crossroads, on the edge of a mid-zone of contamination. One of the major powers on Gaia, this town is heavily armed because it is under frequent attack by raiders and, to a lesser degree, infected. Then we have the high-rise slums. A group of skyscrapers that jut against the sky like rotting teeth. The high-rise slums were an attempt to restore the technology from before the cataclysm. It failed. The homeless and desperate live here now. with each floor controlled by a different minor warlord. There are so many locations here, all of them highly detailed to the point that you could have a series of adventures within a single location, with places such as the old brass mine, the pylon, sanctuary, etc. You have all the details in life on Gaia. You have fiction. Through this excellently written fiction, you can see how things are looked at or seen through the eyes of the members of different factions. You can see stories of hope, of bleakness, of despair, and of high heroics at times. And you can see how people try to get by. You see how others try to take advantage over the situation, over people. You will see some questionable things, some things that are done in order to survive. You will see the psychological and physical burden that people will experience while moving through Gaia and fighting the infection and other humans as well. The rulebook contains a clear character creation process. First, you pick your background. You can come up with any sort of concept, anything that you can imagine. This is a game not based on classes, rather on point buy. So you pick your background, maybe you are some sort of medic, or a warrior, or an engineer, and then you assign your karma. This is how your character acts in the world of Gaia. It's not necessarily that you are always of good intentions or bad intentions. Karma in this game, when it concerns good and evil, takes the final result as the measurement of your good and evil karma. So for example, you could have good intentions, but if you're constantly failing at that, you're going to generate evil karma. Maybe you're causing the deaths of many decent people. Or maybe if you have some violent intentions and you're fighting some of the most damaging or toxic groups in the world, suddenly you find yourself being somewhat of a hero because you're sort of like a stopgap to their plans. So then you start to accumulate a good karma, and you can also be neutral, a bit somewhere in between. And this has some gameplay advantages. That is, where you want to go to a path of good or evil or neutral, there will be things that will affect the mechanics of the game, and we will get into that when we talk about the system. Then you flesh out your character, determining some hobbies and quirks. Maybe you have some strange habits or some sort of vices. Or maybe you have some things that keep you entertained, that keep your spirits up, because in this setting, when survival is the priority, there are some things still unrelated. Maybe you have a pet, or maybe you like to craft some things or play some games. Those are the things that keep your spirits up, and you can use to further flesh out your character. And then you can spend your attribute and skill points. You have 3 categories. You have potence, defense, and reaction. So you have 6, 5, and 4 points respectively that you can allocate however you like in potence, defense, and reaction. So your character could be more focused on fighting, or maybe you're focused on more scholarly pursuits and such. And then you choose your specialty. These are a bit like talents or narrow specializations that you can use as an advantage in all sorts of situations. You can get more than one as you level up, but first you only start with 1. And then you add your size and calculate your derived stats, you purchase some equipment, and you play. Let's talk a bit more about, for example, the background. You can come up with any background, but here you have examples. So you want to create a builder, or a craftsman, or perhaps a driver. Or maybe you are an odd job man, or an official, or an operative, or a prostitute, or a raider. You can be anything. You can have any background that you can imagine. Even if it's not in this list, you can come up with your own type of character concept. And then you determine the appearance, of course. This being a post-apocalypse setting, you won't be exactly the most fashionable unless you live in certain areas of city. And then we have more details on karma. The levels of karma that you start with. If you're in the good side of things, you could be a champion or a hero. If you're a bit more neutral, you could be an equalizer. And if you're on the evil side of things, you could be a renegade or a villain. Then you have information on quirks. You could have some things such as bad luck magnet, you could be cold as ice, or a kleptomaniac or obsessive. All of that has some effects on gameplay. And you also have hobbies. Some things could not be too relevant. Because, for example, if your character builds model airplanes, it's not going to be the most useful skill, but however, maybe you are negotiating with someone who appreciates model airplanes, and maybe you offer to give them some of your planes from your collection, and they actually agree to some sort of plan of yours. You never know. As I was saying, attributes are divided in potence, which comprises strength, intelligence, and charisma. You also have defense, which is stamina and willpower, and reaction, which is comprised of dexterity, wits, and luck. So all of this will have an effect in different skill checks in combat and outside of combat. And you also have three categories of skills. You have personal skills, such as brawl, investigation, melee, survival. You also have technical skills, such as construction, or drive, or explosions, or gunnery. You also have interaction skills, such as commercial skills, instruction skills, intimidation, seduction. When it comes to the specialties, they are powerful talents. Some things like ammo conservation will give you a better chance at using ammunition and guns all the time. And for example, if you are good at blind fighting, well, it doesn't matter if you're out of batteries with your flashlight or if you're in a very dark area, you're going to take the front line, protecting the group from the infected or other humans in melee or brawling. Or maybe you're an instructor, so you are very good at transferring successes in assisted checks. Or maybe you are really good at dual wielding, at repairing stuff, at being a silent killer, or being wise. It all depends on the type of character that you want to build. And all of these different specialties can be game changers. They could be what saves the lives of your character or your entire group. Then you have derived stats. If your character is famous or infamous in Gaia, details related to your size, how much health you have and how much pain you can resist based on your stamina plus size, your initiative modifier, your speed, encumbrance, your defense, damage modifier, and kill modifier. We will talk a bit more about health and all of that when we talk about the system. Gaining experience in era survival is highly adjustable. If you want to have like a low heroics type of game, you could have characters that die quite easily and they level up quite slow. You have 20 levels of experience and you go up in skill points, attribute points, and specialties at different parts of those levels. You never feel like there is an empty level, so to speak. You always get something. So if you want to have a campaign with perhaps really capable people that are highly heroic, you could level up faster. Maybe you level up every time you fulfill a small objective or reach a certain goal. You will level up and gain more points in attribute, skills, specialties, etc. Some of the weapons and equipment that you can find in Gaia, they are quite scarce and some of them are makeshift. They are not the best in quality. This is a post-apocalypse scenario, of course. You could go to different marketplaces and city and get some better quality items, but for the most part you will have to make do with what is available at the moment. You have information on ammunition, crafting and repairing, buying and selling. You get into more details about that in the system section. And you have all sorts of gear and weapons and protection. You have bandages, bottles of fuel. You have flash refill. You need to find out if the zone you are in is perhaps of a mid-level of contamination or lower or higher. And you have the information on how much it costs in brass. All of this divided by tiers as well. Some items are quite expensive. You also have information on food, different knives and tools, a rusty syringe. You have caltrops, batteries. You have all sorts of melee weapons as well. You have daggers and knuckle dusters, bone claws, metal pipes, bats, bows and arrows. You have painkillers as well, shock sticks, all sorts of firearms, guns, shotguns, night vision goggles, machine guns, cars that are broken and in good state as well, medical kits. Any sort of gear and equipment and weapons that you can think of, it's all here, and you also have enough information to come up with your own. It is actually recommended that if you think of something that isn't included in this list, you should put it into your game, just using some of these templates as examples when it comes to the way it works with the mechanics. The list goes into great detail. You even have information on the facilities that you require to craft all of these different weapons and gear. And then you have the bestiary section. Not only do you have examples of different contaminated or mutated beings, you also have a list of deformities. And I love this. I love it how they give you this customization to create any sort of infected imaginable. They could have just included some generic type of creatures or monsters, but here you have a list of deformities. Maybe the enemy has big arms, so it's going to have a high strength. Or maybe it has huge legs with an elevated speed, or maybe it has some sort of protection, such as dense muscle, or maybe it has regeneration, or it's a bit of a leaper. This enemy will be able to jump and climb all the time. Maybe it has multiple arms. There is everything that you will ever need to create some really nightmarish things. And you have the stats of infected humans, bears, burrowers, carrier bats, crones, deer, infected deer. You also have hummers. There's great variety and flexibility in this bestiary. These different creatures can be used in settlements and cities and in the wilderness. You also have man-trap vines, 9-step frog, which is quite sought after by warriors because of its poison to use in weapons and such. And then you have the parasitic locust, the Phibian, which are quite strange. They are amphibians but are in fact warm-blooded. Then we have the rainbow web spider. They actually weave these webs that change color in the presence of parasites. So even though they are extremely venomous, it is useful to capture them and manufacture flash from their webs. You also have rats and mice, trapdoor ant colony, and wolves. Let's talk about the rule set of Era Survival. Those of you that have played Era the Consortium will find it quite familiar. It's basically the same thing, but it does have some original things related to Era Survival. You have dice pools. You usually add an attribute and a skill to roll a number of 10-sided dice. So for example, maybe you have a value of, let's say, strength of 4, and you have some relevant skill of 3. It will be a total of 7 dice. You roll your dice and try to roll above a certain threshold. Maybe the difficulty of a task is 5. So all of those dice, each die that rolls 5 or above is going to be a success. And there are also exploding dice. Every time you roll a 10, you get to roll an additional dice to get a better result. So even if you roll only 7 dice in that case, you could end up with perhaps 10 or more successes if you are lucky. You won't be rolling for everything. You have information on what is considered a trivial action. But you also have the thresholds of success. Some things are going to be more difficult. Maybe you need to roll an 8 or a 7. Some things will be quite easy. Maybe you only need a 3 or a 4. And the more dice that you roll above that threshold, the more successes that you will get, and the better the quality of the action or task. You also have information on when you only need to roll a certain attribute. Maybe you just need like brute force, want to force open a door, and you double your attribute. Maybe you have a strength of 4 and you get actually 8 dice to try to break down that door. You also have information on willpower checks when you need to control yourself. Maybe you want to flee from a nightmare situation. I think this game, Era Survival, is very good if you want to paint some encounters or scenes that are quite grotesque and the characters will want to flee from that area and perhaps get into trouble because of their clumsy getaway. You will need to pass some willpower checks to gain control or keep yourself together. You also have information on opposed rolls, on failures and fumbling, that is, if you roll more once and you roll equal or fewer failures than successes. The more failures that you roll, there will be increasingly negative effects. So for example, maybe it's just a minor thing, you only rolled one more failure than a success. You accomplish the action, but maybe the equipment breaks down, or maybe you take a bit of pain damage. But what if you roll 3 more failures or more than successes? Then there will be severe consequences. Maybe your character loses a limb during that particular situation, or maybe some other party members get hurt. So you have to think about your actions. You also have information on different modifiers that could arise, how to carry out unskilled rolls, and use your luck dice when everything else fails. In fact, I think luck could be a good option if you don't want characters to be dying all the time, even though Era Survival is about character death as well. It's not going to be uncommon for characters to die in a few sessions or less, but with a bit of luck, you can use your luck dice, try to make a roll and see if you save yourself from an impossible situation. You also have information on continuous rolls when you need to accumulate a number of successes over time. You have more details on salvaging and repairing equipment, on how to find it, and what types of skills and attributes are appropriate when you're trying to make something useful out of this newly found object. You also have information on how equipment will become damaged as you use it. You also have information on alternate and improvised weapons. How to sleep rough, you will get a penalty. Your attributes will be reduced if you do not take some comfort when you are resting. You also have information on how to restore those penalties. And luck points. Luck points can also be used to save your character. You can spend them to modify some dice rolls. So you could add 2 successes to a roll, or remove 2 successes from an opposing roll. You could even gain an additional combat round of ammunition or durability for a single weapon. And bad luck points, these are the reverse. Bad luck points are used by game masters to help non-player characters, the opposition. You start out the session with a number of bad luck points, but some bad luck points could be accumulated due to certain decisions or actions that the player characters took, maybe something related to their quirks. Let's talk a bit more about the karma and rewards. As I was saying, you have evil and good karma based on your actions. That is the final result, not your intentions. And you also have a middle ground, and each of those 3 areas has some benefits. If you are constantly doing good things, you'll have some good cards in your hand at all times. They may actually save you from some disastrous results. As you go down on the good scale, you also get Jack of all trades points, that they allow you to have a higher level of skill during different tasks. These Jack of all trades points, they reset after a few hours. And if you are on the evil side of things, you will get some cards that will make situations even more difficult. But if you overcome those situations, you will get higher or better rewards. And as you go down in evil, again, you lose a number of evil cards, but you get Jack of all trades points. And if you are completely neutral, you get no cards, no good cards, no evil cards. You get a neutral 2 Jack of all trades points with a 2-hour reset. So it's all up to you. The cards are included with this rulebook in digital format, or maybe there are physical cards, I haven't checked. But if you buy the PDF, they are included here. So you will have to think about your actions. What is going to happen to others and yourself when you are taking difficult decisions? The game master, of course, will probably be the final judge, but you have some guidelines that as long as you are working in a constructive or positive way, you're going to get some good points. But if you are a bit more on the destructive or selfish side, you will get evil points. maybe some of you will want to remain a bit neutral, sacrificing those good and evil cards while keeping those points to be better at different tasks and skill checks. Let me give you an example of how these cards can be used. We have on the evil side of things, we have Spontaneous Morph. It says target any infected. The effect, that infected gains a random new deformity every combat turn. Highly unpredictable, very dangerous. But the reward, it doubles your successes for the salvage roll on this enemy. So you could get better gear or weapons or something useful or vital for the particular mission at hand. And on the good side of things, you have the Super Serum. This is playable anytime, but no more than once every 24 hours. And you can actually triple a nominated attribute for 5 minutes. This is going to be very useful in combat, in my opinion. Then we have information on taking damage and when you are dying. There are two types of damage. You have pain damage. It represents pain and fatigue. You have pain boxes. If all of your pain boxes are filled, you'll become unconscious and you'll get the bleeding status and you will begin to die. But if you get health damage, this is life-threatening injuries. If all of your health boxes are filled with damage, you die. So you'll have to keep both of these things in mind as you perform different tasks and as you fight the infected and other humans. You'll have to keep in mind that in some situations the most that you will get, maybe you'll drop down unconscious, maybe it's a very arduous task with a risk of injury, but if someone is actively trying to kill you, you have to be really careful because they may actually end your life right there. Although if the damage isn't too drastic, it is possible to heal yourself over time. You may even remain awake if you are about to drop down dead. It is possible, but you will need medical attention as soon as possible. You have information on instant medical attention, the survival roll that I was telling you. You make your roll to avoid death. That means you keep moving at least for 30 seconds before dropping down. It is possible to keep yourself alive by doing that. And you also have thresholds. That is, if you take enough damage that goes above your kill threshold, you will die immediately. So this game is quite gritty and somewhat more realistic. And you can't be too carefree about taking risks, even calculated risks. Sometimes your character will die then and there because there was just too much damage. Maybe you were squashed by something. So this is not a game for the foolish. You also have information on infected, on how the infection takes over. You need to apply injection as soon as possible. Within 10 minutes, it's still treatable. But as the hours go by, the incubation will start and you will need more injection, and the risk of death because of the reaction between the infection and the parasites will rise until you become a mutant yourself. Maybe you will be attacking your former party members. You have information on different conditions such as bleeding, drowning and suffocation, things related to hazards such as fire and acid, the effects of encumbrance, being poisoned and restrained. There are also specific modes that you can go into. So for example, when you go stealth mode, this is all about moving around, trying not to get caught. But there is also, for example, survival mode. This is about adrenaline taking over. You make a roll, and if you are successful, you will take pain damage from all sources rather than health damage, and you are immune to instant kills. But this is one of like berserker type of situations, but not exactly, because you cannot attack or act, you only move. That is, you cannot take an offensive action against an enemy. You're going to be focused on rolling with the punches, running, hiding, jumping, all of that in survival mode. And you can only enter it every 3 combat turns or every 30 seconds. You have information concerning any situation or condition imaginable. You also have information on how to enter combat, of course. You determine your initiative and go through different combat turns. It also feels like a skill check, and depends on the situation, it will be a contested skill check as well. So you have information on your defense, on how you are protected by armor, how you can get into cover, perform sneak attacks and stealth combat, it is possible to sneak around, for example, and break someone's neck. And the funny thing is, for example, if you apply this to the infected could actually turn into some sort of zombie when you kill it right then and there. You also have information on coup de grace, what happens when you use a weapon in each hand, multi-shot and multiple attacks, hitting and damage, firing and multiple targets simultaneously. If you want to have like a spread shot from your machine gun, you can do that. How to use vehicles in combat as well. Unarmed combat. You have good rules when it comes to grappling. It's basically an opposed roll, and depending on the successes that you roll above the opponent's roll, you get to deal damage or wriggle free in case you are being grappled, or you can even break the neck. You have details on how to provide cover fire. You have different flow charts. So if you do not find an explanation to be completely clear, you can see these flow charts and you will understand how those combat actions are carried out, related to thrown weapons and explosions, the area of effect. Anything imaginable in a combat situation in a post-apocalypse environment is perfectly detailed here in the rule set of Era Survival. And then you have the Game Master section giving you general advice about everything in the game, teaching you how to be flexible as a game master, encouraging creativity, but also how to use attributes and skills, handle ammunition. And if you don't like using cards, you can use a d20 because all of the cards are numbered. You also have information how to gain items and how to handle horrifying situations, anything related to the infected, what types of effects attacks can have on them. Everything related to scavenging and speeding up combat, because one of the difficulties, for example, in old World of Darkness games, which were success counting D10 games as well, they were not really good at handling mass combat. But here, you could have a battle between, for example, different settlements, or a settlement being attacked by mutants, and you could have perhaps 30 or 40 enemies attacking the group, and you have a way to distribute those wounds quickly and efficiently. You basically just make a single roll and you multiply the roll. Maybe, for example, you have 30 enemies, you make one attack, you multiply it by 30, and you distribute that damage equally amongst the opposing force, the party members perhaps. In that situation, I would definitely recommend that you have some non-player characters to serve as a bit of as mid shields, because otherwise the damage is going to be quite heavy. And then you have information on what you can do concerning technology, the weapon noise, more things related to survivability, how to create a survival horror experience, anything related to respawning when it comes to the enemies, downtime. You also have examples of different sessions and campaigns. You even have frameworks for sessions and campaigns. You also have examples on how to use skills and worked examples for pretty much any mechanic in the game system. At the end, you have appendices detailing example fumble outcomes, example playable characters, suggested non-player character statistics, and the card list that I was telling you about. Now, what do I think of Era Survival? I am very pleased and surprised with this game. At first I thought that maybe this was going to be somewhat like a stereotypical zombie apocalypse type of experience, but the survival theme and the aspect of staying alive in this post-apocalypse world of Gaia is pretty amazing. Everything related to making weapons and repairing them, everything related to, for example, camping and eating and surviving in those areas of high contamination. And the mutants feel quite original and disturbing. The fact that you can come up with mutations quite quickly means that you will never run out of mutants. You have examples in the bestiary, but it's quite easy for you to turn any animal and different humans in all sorts of aberrations and walking nightmares. You can challenge the players in different combat situations, but also outside of combat, thanks to the information related to different settlements. You could have an entire campaign with average looking or working characters. They do not have to be like action heroes. They could be just people trying to survive in a particular settlement, and suddenly this electric system went down or the food became scarce because there are high levels of infection, or maybe there are a lot of mutants walking around, or maybe there is a clash with some other faction. You could have some interesting developments, drama, and situations that have to rely more on skill checks, perhaps even diplomacy. But you can also go quite brutal. There are many opportunities searching for bolts, acting as a sort of a courier for the runners, trying to protect people if you're a member of the defenders, or you want to play on the villainous side of things. You could be a bit like an agent of destruction if you work for some of the most violent factions, like the Cult of Progression or the Nihilists, or maybe the Swarm. And you can have conflicts and politics within the post-apocalypse environment. You can have some trading campaigns as well. The marketplaces are there, but the situation is less than optimal when it comes to resupplying. So this is a game to explore every aspect about the world. I also think that this rulebook is so complete. You have a campaign setting, you have all of the background needed, you have so many options to create player characters, you have a bestiary, and as I was telling you, the table of mutations to come up with your own enemies. You have a large selection of gear, weapons, protective clothing. I also think it surpasses some other success counting D10 systems for a post-apocalypse scenario, not only because of the rules to repair and scavenge and create your own survival gear and weapons, but because you can also have a practical and efficient way to handle mass combat. There are just so many good things about Era Survival, and this is just the core rulebook. I'm really excited to see what the expansions are all about. I definitely think that my favorite aspect of this game is how well crafted or fleshed out the factions are and their different bases of operations. Because the mutants are there, they are the big threat, they are what keeps the world of Gaia in peril, in a sort of toxicity that you never know when you're going to get infected. Maybe you're getting attacked, maybe an agent of one of the most evil factions is going to try to infect you, or maybe there is a combat against some sort of beast. There are also some tragic stories in the fiction in this book. Another good thing about the rulebook, you have fiction to get a sense or a flavor of the game world, where the characters simply have no hope. And then you have other stories that are quite heroic and even altruistic. I think that's the strongest aspect of Era Survival. It gracefully hovers between extremes. So suddenly you have this really bleak scenario. Suddenly it's a bit in between. And suddenly there is hope and heroism. So I definitely recommend that you get Era Survival, especially if you're looking for a post-apocalypse setting that is unpredictable, that has an excellently crafted game world and system of factions. So definitely get Era Survival. I really recommend it. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.